Mike Avery's Outdoor Magazine is brought to you in part by the Hunter Safety System.
Okay, so now I'm happy for Pat. He shot his big 8-point that he'd been wanting for so long, and he's back on the airplane. He's heading back to Michigan. And you know what? I was kind of happy for myself, too, because now I could pick up the darton, and I could head back to that blind again.
Yeah, it's an excellent spot. Got good cover in the background, feed all the way around you. Just a good spot.
And lots of buck shooting over in there.
Yep, there's 8 or 10 bucks in there that I knew of. That was the end of September, 1st October, when I started doing a lot of looking and setting the cameras out.
So I head out there the next day, and it's surprisingly warm, and it's rainy, and it just didn't feel like December at all. Nothing moved that night. I wasn't really surprised, but the good news is the weather was supposed to turn over the night, and it was supposed to be cold in the morning. Boy, I had no idea just how cold it would be. So I get out there the next morning. It's 8 degrees. It was so cold and nasty that morning that the deer really didn't move first thing. It was an hour after daylight on that very cold morning before the deer started to move. Then I see some does coming in front of me to eat, just 20 yards right in front of me, and a beautiful bow shot. So I'm looking at the does. They're looking off to the left. I pan the camera off to the left. I'm looking to the left, and what do I see? A big, beautiful buck looking right at us, looking at the does, and he's walking straight towards us. So I get the camera on this guy. Realize I'm by myself now, right? So I've got to get the camera turned around on the animal. I've got to try to reach to get my bow and hopefully be able to get a shot, because he looks like he's coming. I think he's coming in probably to check those does out, maybe to eat. I don't know. But he was definitely coming that direction. He skirted into the edge of the woods, angled towards me. He got to about 30 yards from the blind, and he stopped. This is when I got a good look at him. Not very wide, but very tall. Real long brow tines, real long G2s, and he had a little drop tine off the right-hand side. And I thought, okay, all this time in the woods, all this time on the road coming back and forth to Kansas, it's now going to pay off, Avery. You're going to get your shot at a beautiful buck. About the time I'm thinking it's going to happen, a huge gust of wind hit the blind. The blind started to flap a little bit. He looked at me, he turned to his left, and he trotted off. And that's the last I saw of that buck.
So I guess you could say that the blind maybe cost me that buck. I don't look at it that way. Without this blind, without this Ameristep Dominator blind today to get out of this wind, I wouldn't even be out here. There's no way you could sit out in this today without some kind of shelter. So the way the deer are moving today, I got a good feeling another big boy is going to wander by. Just hope I can tough it out.
All right, so I'm excited because I know that the bucks are moving and there are big bucks in the area. The problem is I'm starting to run out of time. In fact, I've only got one more night in the blind. So that night, I go out to the same spot. I mean, after all, we've seen deer all through there. We've seen bucks in there. There's scrapes all over. I know they're using the area. I know there's the big drop tine in there. Maybe I'll see him again. So I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. Nothing's moving. Nothing is moving. Then just a little bit before dark, I see a 1.5-year-old buck come in off the hill from my right and work his way in. I'm thinking, all right, things are starting to move. This is cool. He walks in front of me. I pan to the left with him with a camera, and I stop, and in the background, looking through the viewfinder of the camera, I see here comes a big buck walking in. Now, I say big buck. He was big-bodied, he was wide, and at first I thought he was a 6-point. He was kind of spindly, didn't have a lot of mass, but he was a big-bodied buck. So this big 6, I look at him closer now with my binos, and I see, you know what, he's actually an 8-point that he's busted off. But still, do I want to shoot this animal? I mean, he's a huge-bodied deer. He's wide, but I'm in Kansas, and I know the type of bucks that are here. I had a close encounter with a beautiful buck just a few hours earlier. So I'm thinking, I think I'm not going to shoot this guy. I let him come in. I let him come in and eat in front of me for the longest time. A couple of more 1.5-year-old bucks filtered in. So now I've got these bucks eating in front of me at 20 yards. They're giving me perfect shots. Of course, I'm not going to shoot the 1.5-year-olds. I choose not to shoot the big 6, actually 8. And in wanders a 10-point. Now, the interesting thing about this 10-point is, physically, his body was so much smaller than the big broken-off 8-point. I figured the broken-off 8 to be about 3.5. He just didn't have good mass, but his body was huge. Now, this 10-point had good mass, but his body, compared to the big broken-off 8, was very small. I figured he was only a 2.5-year-old buck. Now I've got a decision. I've got a big-bodied, probably 3.5-year-old broken-off 8 in front of me, giving me a shot. I've got what I think is a 2.5-year-old 10-point with pretty good mass, also giving me a shot. What do? I'm not a trophy hunter, but I couldn't bring myself to shoot that 2.5-year-old 10-point, because if he's that big at 2.5, what's he going to be at 3.5? Plus, I know the quality of bucks that are running around out there. Long story short, I watched those bucks all night long, and I let them go. And that's okay. I didn't take a buck on this trip. I had close encounters. I could have taken bucks. I chose not to, and I'm okay with that. Ed Barton, you run a first-class operation. I cannot wait to come back and hunt with you again this fall, and maybe we'll get another look at that big 10-point with a drop tine.